Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing some watercolor pieces. I did watercolor last year quite a bit. It was really fun to explore, and I'm not professional or anything at it. I'm still just trying to have fun with it, but that's what I wanted to do today, was just to have some fun. So I thought it'd be cool to do these flower girl illustrations, and I wanted to do this a while ago, but I couldn't decide on what flowers I wanted to do because there's just so many unique ones. But today I narrowed it down to 3, and unfortunately I don't know the name of the first one. I just took a picture of it when I was in the store as a reference photo, but it was this beautiful red color, so I thought it'd be really fun to use that as like a background color for the whole piece. I started off with doing a wash in the background because I didn't want to try and fight with the background later. With watercolor, I find it's important to do kind of the background element before the foreground element, because you just run into problems or muddy colors. So I picked a yellow because I thought it would look nice with the red, and I did it really light because I didn't want it to pull from the illustration itself. I just wanted it to be exactly that, a background. Now I'm kind of using a mix of colors, like of the watercolors up top and this little semi-wet panel I have beside me. I've never really known which ones to buy, so I just kind of buy whatever colors look nice to me, and yeah, I just kind of make it work with whatever I got. I was happy to finally obtain one of these little flower watercolor palettes. It was super handy in this, and it was really easy to clean, so I'm happy I picked that up down the line. For the coloring though, I decided to just kind of hop into it with the red. I I watered it down so that way it would be less intense right off the bat, because I wasn't entirely sure how dark I wanted to go with it, and the red I had is pretty dark just straight from the tube. But I knew I wanted to add layers and kind of get that depth of color. So I started off with a really pale tone initially, and I think that worked out in my favor because it made it a lot easier to layer the colors. I know the last time I did watercolor I was actually pretty afraid to ever, color the piece, because watercolor is kind of do or die, once it's there. Yeah, you can lift it a little bit, but it's not the same as like acrylic where you can just paint over top of it and it's gone. It does take a little bit of work, so I find it, after doing acrylic a little more, I find it almost relieving to get over the fear of starting a piece, but it definitely is a complete switch from what I was doing before to this, because if I messed up it was a lot harder to fix. So I went pretty slow with this and just kind of slowly built up the colors in hopes that I wouldn't end up with muddy colors or colors bleeding into different areas. And I mean, with watercolor you may end up with that anyway, but it's not really that big of a deal. The amount of layers that you put on with the color, I feel kind of, usually you can fix the mistake. Don't get me wrong, sometimes you can't, and I've been there. I've got some ugly pieces in my sketchbook, but with this, like I said, I just took my time with it, and I think that helped me get a result I was really happy with. Out of the 3 pieces that I did, this one is probably my favorite because I just like how warm the color palette was, and I think it just all worked together really well. In saying that though, there was a lot of points in all these illustrations where I really was unsure about how they were turning out. I find watercolor has a lot of ugly stages, and it's hard to see, the field between the trees sort of deal. I think that's wrong, but whatever. It's hard to see the final product initially when you're looking at it because all you see is mistakes. And what I've always struggled with watercolor is, well, embracing the texture really at the end of the day. I find, I see a lot of artists, they can do really smooth watercolors, or they embrace the texture entirely of when the water dries, and I'm horrible with texture. For me, when I see the texture of the watercolor, it's not a smooth line. Like when I do digital art, it's not blended out. It's really hard for me to kind of get past that. But with these, I really tried to just use those hard lines, kind of like cell shading, and make it something that I was happy to look at. Sometimes easier said than done, but I think all in all it does look really good, and I'm really happy with these. When it came to lining it, I actually waited a long time to line it. When I used to do watercolor last year, I would always line it first and then I would watercolor it, and I found I was struggling to, you know, get in the lines, or I was afraid of going out of the line entirely. So this way, if I do the lining last, it takes a lot of pressure off for me. So now if I go outside the line, oh well, I'll just draw the line around it. And I found that a lot easier. And you know, some people can do it the other way around, and that's fine. But I found this way was a lot easier for me. And the liner I'm using, I got out of, I think it was a Scroller box. It was the one that was for drawing with waffles, the one that she was a part of. And I absolutely love the color, and I think it worked really well to make these illustrations look light and warm rather than using a harsh black liner. I do have like purples or blues or pinks, but I think this was a really good color to pick for that, so I'm really happy I chose it. My only regret with this liner isn't the liner itself, but the fact that I chose not to untape the picture from my desk, because I had to hold my hand at these really weird angles to get the lines, and it would have been so much easier if I had just taken it off and like spun it around. And I know that's not super interesting to see when I'm turning it around, but it's the easiest way for me to find lines. So the fine lining part of it was actually super difficult for me. So hindsight, maybe I would untape it and then just do it. Like I said earlier, this one is definitely my favorite one out of the three I've done. I think the colors just look so nice together, and everything just looks really put together, so I'm happy with how it turned out. For the second one here, I wanted to do an illustration based on a morning glory. And the morning glories I have in my backyard, they're a purple and pink flower, and they're a vine plant, so I thought it'd be really pretty if I integrated it into like a braid or an updo hairstyle. So that's what I went with, was a very poorly drawn braid, but I'm working on that. I'll get it one day right. But I wanted to kind of do a flower crown sort of look, and then have the vines coming in and out of her hair, and the flowers, you know, popping out. So I thought that would be really pretty. Her hair though, I did struggle with it. I did initially pick this like golden color like the first one, but later on you'll see when I picked the skin tone, they were just too similar and you couldn't tell them apart, so I ended up changing it. Like, it looks okay, but it's just kind of, it didn't work for what I was going for. I was originally scared to paint over all the vines, but I felt it was a light enough color, it wasn't gonna be a big deal, because I was gonna paint over it with green, so if it was a little yellow, it wasn't a big deal. I think the biggest problem I have with watercolor, and it might have been why I took a break from it for a while, is that I'm very impatient, and watercolor needs time to dry, unless you're going for like a blended effect. But like, I didn't want the leaves or the vines to blend in with her hair, but I didn't give it enough time to necessarily dry, so I did get some bleed from the colors into each other. And I don't know why I'm so impatient about it. I guess I really wanted to get going with the illustration, not just wait around, but I need to learn the patience of the medium, and I think that would help me down the road like it a lot more if I just took the time with it. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with watercolor initially, is just the waiting period between the layers. I didn't really have any rhyme or reason where I was going to put the vines. After I had colored over them all, I decided to just start throwing them in random places and hope that they looked okay. Because I drew them almost sparse, you know, when I first initially sketched it. So I wanted to add a little more color, a little more life into these flowers. So I just started drawing random lines where I thought it would look okay. And intertwining them where it may or may not work. I kind of pictured them completely woven into her hair, so I wanted them to kind of disappear and reappear and disappear and reappear. So I think all in all it looks okay. I don't know if it necessarily makes sense, but you know what? I like it, and that's all that really matters. As you can see, before I even changed the hair color again, I did also end up shading it, and I think this is kind of when I started to be unsure of the colors. I didn't know what skin tone I was going to do with this. I actually had a lot of problems with this skin tone. I don't know why. I ended up mixing in some white watercolor, and I think that was kind of what messed up my whole color palette, because it looked milky, for lack of a better way of putting it. It does look nice on the page, but it was really hard for me to mix it together initially. I had to spend a lot of time with it. As you can see here, the skin tone, when I put it down, I feel, even though I had mixed different colors to get this tone, it was so similar to her hair, and it just looks so strange. And I'm kind of glad I did the line art last, or else I might not have noticed this as much. Like, it was very noticeable to me when they were side by side like that. Like, her forehead looks like it's part of her bangs. So I was really unhappy that I was unable to achieve the color I wanted. So I mixed up a brown and lightly put it on, you know, overlaid it a couple times just to kind of get a different tone. And I think all in all it does look quite nice. I think it works for what I was going for. It might be a little mousy colored, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. All that really mattered at the end of the day for her hair was that it was a different tone than her face, because once I added the shading to the face, it would have all just looked like one color, and it just would have looked awful. So with the Morning Glory, the center of the flower is pink, at least in the variety that I have. And then the outer part of the flower is supposed to be purple. But when I did this, I picked such a washed out pink. Yeah, I think I just picked what was the background and I put it down initially and then put the purple on top. But I ended up losing a lot of the pink and I had to reapply it and redo it a couple times. But I did get a result I was happy with, but I definitely wish I made the flowers bigger, so it would have been a lot easier to mix the two colors and it would have been, you know, a nicer gradient to look at. But you know what, it works and I'm happy with it altogether. It's just not quite what I was hoping for, so I think maybe drawing the flowers bigger would have made that big of a difference for me. I know we're kind of at the tail end of summer and a lot of people are gearing up for fall, but for me, I think summer for the most part is my favorite season other than maybe spring, because I love all the flowers being in bloom, and a lot of the flowers in my garden are starting to bloom at the end of the season and it's just really beautiful. So that was kind of my inspiration for this. I'm not quite ready for fall where I live. It gets really cold really fast, so I'll enjoy what little bit of summer I have left. This one took a lot longer to fine line because of all the small details in the flowers. And I really wanted to, you know, make sure that they actually looked like flowers and not like blobs in her hair or something like that. And I did want to add some definition with the braid and add, you know, kind of make it look like the hair was overlapping. I don't know if I was entirely successful at that, because by the time I got around to fine lining the braid, all my pink lines underneath from my pencil were already kind of washed away, so I kind of had to guess which way I was drawing the braid, but I don't think it looks terrible. It's just not perfect, and that's okay. I'll get there. I think this one turned out really pretty. It's not my favorite, but I do really like how the colors look together, and she just looks very elegant to me, and my phone camera makes this look a lot brighter than I think it is, but I really loved it. For the last one here, I picked these beautiful yellow mums that you usually see in the store this time of year. I think the full name is chrysanthemum, but everybody calls them mums, and they're a really dense flower with lots of little petals, and I thought it would be beautiful, kind of like almost like a bun in the hair, and I put them on either side for those cute like little pigtails that you see people do, or like, you know, Princess Leia's space buns sort of concept. That was what I was thinking of with these flowers. Originally they were going to be this this pom-pom looking daisy that I found, but I couldn't get it to look right, and I had already done a flower with pink in it, and the ones I was thinking of had pink in the middle as well, so I thought it'd be more interesting to do a bright color flower, so I picked a yellow one down the line. For her skin tone, I picked the same watercolor that I used for the brown in the other girl's hair, but I made it a little darker because it was, what I had initially was really washed out. And it was really hard not to get this to look streaky when I was using it just as is initially. And this is what I mean by the ugly phase for me. The watercolor, if I can't keep all the edges wet, I start to get that weird kind of, I think people call it like a cauliflower look, or a blooming look, something like that. But I tried to keep the wash nice and even, and the first wash wasn't the best, but after a couple of them I think I really got it quite nice. But it just took a little bit of work. Originally her hair was going to be a lot longer, and it would have like cascaded, well, you wouldn't see it, but it would have cascaded like down her back. But I felt if I did that, it just took up too much of the illustration, so I cut her hair short and kind of like a nice cute little wavy bob, and I thought that would look really cute with this. For her hair, I picked a watercolor that I've never used. It's like a gray violet, and you can see in the watercolor pan actually when it starts to separate, you can see the reds and the blues and the grays all kind of separate. It's actually quite pretty, but I'm not sure if this one is one of those watercolors where you get texture, like it adds little speckles or not, but I found I had a lot of texture with this, so maybe I just grabbed the wrong watercolor, I'm not sure. But I think it actually adds to the hair. When I looked at it originally, I was actually super freaked out about this color. I thought it looked awful. I couldn't find a color that looked suitable, but I didn't want to use like a straight black because I thought that would be too harsh on the drawing. And this color here, because it has that violet and that blue in it, I think it ties into the color I chose for the background, and it makes it a little more cohesive than it's just a straight black. But for a majority of part of her hair, I was really unhappy with it because it was just so faded and washed out, and I was worried about adding too much at a time. But down the line, when I add the shading, I think actually it really came together for me. So what I did for shading with this one rather than what I did on the other one, I took chunks of the hair and made that a darker color to add a variety into the hair rather than just trying to do like, you know, like a shadow under the flower, because I thought this would be more interesting with the hairstyle I went. When I do straight hair, I do just kind of like streaks up like in the original one. So this one I wanted to try something different. And I think actually it looks really nice and it worked really well for what I was going for. I don't think the hair necessarily makes sense with how I have the flowers in it. Part of her hair would have to be pulled back, and maybe it's kind of like, maybe it's like really poofy ponytails on the side like that. Ponytail's the wrong word, pigtail. But I think either way it still looks really nice to me. I picked a bright yellow because I think the mums look really pretty when they're in yellows and oranges, and I thought it would just add a lot of life into the color scheme because I had those two darker tones already, so it was a nice pop of color. I did try and add like a little bit of pink in there here and there, but it just never quite came together that way, the way I wanted it. It added a little bit of depth to it, which I did like, because I feel when you shade yellow, you have to use like oranges or reds and whatnot, you know, something to darken it, because when you add more yellow, unless you go like a darker yellow, it just kind of meh, it's yellow, right? So I thought it actually added a lot more, even though it's not really that easy to see. I think for this one I definitely struggled with the hair the most, because I probably could have gone a lot darker and, you know, kept it less gray looking, but like I said before, if I did a straight black, I thought it would have just been too jarring against all the other soft colors that I had. So I am happy that I left it the way it is. I just thought maybe I could have darkened it a little more. I'm not entirely sure. But adding the separate segments of the hair like that, I think added a lot to the illustration, because it looks a lot softer and more like it has more volume to it. So I'm really happy with it. But for the longest time, like I said, it was in that kind of that phase that I had a hard time seeing what I liked about it. For the liner, I used the same marker, or the same fine liner again. I did debate using a different color, but I thought if I used this one, at least it would be clear they were all from the same kind of illustration family. I don't know how to explain it any other way than that right now. But I thought it would make them all look cohesive together, rather than, you know, this one has a different liner and looks different than the other ones. I took the time to line each of the waves, and I don't know if it's necessarily as noticeable as it is, you know, in the flowers or on her skin, but I think it just adds a little bit more texture to the hair, which I really wanted. When it came to fine lining the flower itself, I actually ended up getting a hand cramp from it because of all the little circles in the center of the flower, and then all the little loops for the petals of the flower. It was just really uncomfortable to line, and again, like the other two pieces, I didn't take off the tape and fine line it that way, which I think probably would have negated a little bit of the cramping, but that's okay. I think it still looks alright. But yeah, I really like all three of these illustrations. It's been a long time since I did watercolor, so I'm really happy this was a good experience for me, and I hope you guys like it as well. I'm really proud of these three illustrations, and I like to maybe one day use them as a postcard or something like that, because I'm just that happy with them. Anyway, that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!